Hello everybody, this is Esther with simplehomeandhearth.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Simple Home and Hearth Online. And as you can see, I am already well into the process of canning up some zucchini, yellow squash, rutabaga. It's August, it's the end of August, and so the gardens around here in West Virginia are coming to fruition, and neighbors are sharing with one another, and I happen to be blessed with a lot of zucchini and yellow squash and cucumbers. I haven't gotten to those yet. I'm going to pickle those. Rutabaga, you name it. So today is Sunday, and it's a very busy day for me in canning. But as you can see, I have yellow squash that's already parboiling. I put it in the boiling water after cleaning the squash and chopping it up into, chunks like this. Yeah. And if I can find my teaspoon, what did I do with my teaspoon? Oh, there it is. Not very organized this morning. But I have a jar here, a wide mouth quart jar filled with yellow squash after it's parboiled for a couple minutes, 3 minutes. I'm going to put a teaspoon of coarse kosher salt in my clean and sterilized jars. I am going to pour boiling water into the jars until it gets just to the rim or to the lip. Yeah. Just to the lip, about right there. Not all the way full, but you want it a good inch or so below the rim. And wipe it down. I have my rings soaking over here in hot water to soften the seal. And you don't want to hand tighten really super tight. Just tighten it. If you want to tighten it by hand really tight, loosen it like a quarter of a turn. When you put it in a pressure canner, that's what you need to do. So that's what I'm doing. One jar in a pressure canner. And I have to get another jar out, which I already have right here. Ta-da! These jars have been cleaned and sterilized. They're not hot, but everything that's going in here is hot. And I think these few that I just parboiled, because I got distracted by setting up the video camera and everything to show you what I'm doing, they cooked a little bit long, but that's all right. This jar might be a little bit mushy. So I'm going to reuse the water that I have boiling here. Put the last of my yellow squash in there to just kind of simmer for a couple minutes. This kind of gets, yellow squash is pretty dry. It's almost like a sponge. And if you don't parboil them before you can them, I know some people don't, but I like to, because once it's parboiled and kind of soaks up some of that water, it actually doesn't get as mushy in the can when you prep it for the pressure canner. So let me show you something here. This is, you see that? This is rutabaga. There you go, rutabaga. Zucchini. And I didn't have as much zucchini, but that's zucchini and at the bottom and yellow squash at the top. They're in the same family, so it doesn't matter. This is yellow squash. And I have another jar of rutabaga, but it's a pint jar, so I'm going to wait and put it in last. See if I can't double up my pressure canner. So you will have to forgive, my kitchen is a mess today. But anyway, when these are parboiled and ready to be put in the jar, I might have a few extra, but I'll just pour some salt on those and eat them. But as soon as those are done, I'll come right back and I'll tell you the process for your pressure canner. So right now I wanted to give you a tip about the rutabaga. In order to process the rutabaga, usually when they come out of the ground, they're filthy because they're a root vegetable, and they can be substituted for potatoes. And but what you want to do is, before you cut them or anything, take a brush and run it under some cold water, or if you have a creek nearby, scrub it and get it really clean on the outside. Then cut the root and the tops off and then peel them. They peel so much better than potatoes. The skin is really thin and it's just really easy to peel. And then after you peel them, you chop them up into cubes and you parboil them just like I'm doing with the yellow squash, and for about 3 to 5 minutes for the rutabaga. Then you put them in clean, sterilized, wide mouth jars, either quart or pint. And the reason you want to use a wide mouth jar is because when you go to open the can and use the rutabaga, you're not going to have this small opening that's going to bottleneck those big chunks of rutabaga when you try to pour them out. So wide mouth is always better. You can use regular mouth if that's all you have, but for convenience sake, a wide mouth jar is better when you're canning chunky food like this. So anyway, they have to process at the same time as the yellow squash and the zucchini. So put them all in there as much as you can in the pressure canner. And so that's how you prepare the rutabaga. With a little bit of salt, and just like I'm doing with the yellow squash, a little bit of salt, a full teaspoon for a quart size and half a teaspoon for a pint size jar, and pour boiling water on top of all of that up to, the rim, or the lip I should say, where the jar comes in like this, right there at that line. You want a good inch from the top. You don't want to fill it too full because then you'll have siphoning and maybe sealing problems. So that's how you fill it up. Rutabaga, squash, everything that I'm doing today, that's what you want. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, the last of my yellow squash has been parboiling for about 3 minutes. And I use this skimmer. I use this so much for my kitchen stuff. I use it, goodness, especially when I'm canning. This is a great tool. I love it. I wish I had more than one, but one does me. Anyway, you can use a slotted spoon too if you don't have one of these big skimmer things. Dump it in there. These chunks are pretty big and they don't want to go down in there sometimes. All right. There's big gaps and holes. I don't want that, so I'm going to kind of push it down here and try to fill up some of those gaps. Hopefully I can fit more pieces in here. Yep, I think that's going to be it. Don't think I can fit any more in there. Maybe one more piece. Yep. All right, I got it pretty full. You can see this. Got it pretty full. And now I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt in my quart jar on top. And I'm using coarse kosher salt. And it's just my store brand, but it works. But the main thing is you want pure kosher salt that does not have any iodine in it when you're canning. Always use kosher salt, always. All right, now to pour the water in. I know some people that use the leftover water from this to put in there, but cucumbers and yellow squash and rutabaga, they've got a lot of starch in them, and so I don't want to put starchy water in my jar. I want to use pure. This is filtered water too. I want to use pure filtered water when I'm canning. I don't want the starchy water to go back in the jar. That's just my preference. All right, that's filled up to where the jar starts getting narrower right here, right at the lip. And I'm gonna just take the handle of my skimmer here, get some air bubbles out, wipe down the rim, get my lid that I've had soaking in boiling water. I didn't boil my lids, I just let them soak in that hot water. That's good enough. You don't want to boil them, because sometimes boiling these canning lids, especially the Ball brand, can actually weaken the rubber and doesn't seal very well. And I like to reuse my lids. A lot of people don't. They're like, oh, you've got to throw them away. No, I will reuse them. I have a tool I use to open the jar so it doesn't bend the lid when I open it, and I take very good care of my lids. I don't damage them, and I will reuse them several times until they start failing. When a jar fails, I'm like, okay, the lid gets tossed. So you can reuse lids. They say you can't because they want more money. They want you to buy more lids, but I don't. All right, into the pressure canner it goes. Okay, I have a 7-quart pressure canner, and I can double up the, you know, if I have smaller jars, I can put another, what do you call that thing? Divider, and then, or a spacer, I should say, put another one and then put smaller jars on top. It'll still fit. But I don't have 7 quarts of anything today. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarts and 1 pint. So I'm going to put the lid on my canner and get the heat turned on, and everything in here has started out at room temperature, or cold, as they say. The contents in the jars are hot. The jars are already clean, and so I softened my lids and got those soaking and soft. And the water itself is tepid. It's not hot, it's not cold. It's just, I start off everything like cool or room temperature. I'm gonna put the lid on it and get it going. Hold on just a minute. Okay, with this pressure canner that I have, it's a Presto, 23-quart pressure canner, and it has a gauge on it. It has a pressure protection plug. It has a vent, and you want to check to make sure that you can see through that vent, and it's all cleaned out. There's nothing clogging it. And this is a pressure plug as well. This rubber pressure plug right here on the lid will pop out if the pressure gets too high to prevent an explosion. So pressure canners and pressure cookers that are made today are extremely safe. You don't have to worry about any explosions happening or killing yourself with pressure canners, because this little valve right here is the lifesaver. It pops out, releases the pressure so nothing explodes. And this gauge will tell you at what pressure. Because I am up in the Appalachian Mountains, not real high, but I'm at 2,500 feet up in the mountains, I have to use a high pressure elevation. I'm at high pressure elevation. So I am going to process these Let me match up the arrow. Match up the arrow. Squeeze it shut. Get it adjusted on the burner there. And I'm going to turn my fire on high. There we go. Now, let me just talk to you for a minute. So, on this pressure canner, it's going to start boiling, and then this is not going to go up. You won't see this pressure gauge move. But when the water gets really hot, this thing pops up because the pressure builds and it pushes that thing up, and it boop, and then this starts spitting steam out of it really fast. And you let it vent for 10 minutes. You have to do that because you don't want any air inside the chamber of your pressure cooker or pressure canner. So you vent it for 10 minutes, and then once it's vented, where is it? Hold on, I have to find it. I think I put it over here. I did. After it's vented for 10 minutes, that's when you add, this is a gauge, a weighted gauge. This one starts jiggling at 15 pounds of pressure. That's what I want for my elevation. And so then you just put the lid, that thing on there, and when it starts jiggling, you'll notice this thing starts creeping up. And then the pressure gets to 15. I turn my fire down. On my stove, it's about 3.5 to 4, depending on how many jars and what kind of capacity I have inside the pressure canner. I turn it down, the heat, 3.5 to 4, and then I start my timer. And I will process everything that's in here, the yellow squash, the zucchini, and the rutabaga, for 35 minutes because I have mostly quart jars in there. 1 pint jar only needs to go for 30 minutes, but 5 more minutes isn't going to hurt it. And you need 35 minutes of processing time for the quart jars that are in here. So let's get this thing going, and I will show you what it looks like when the process continues. Okay? Gotta wait for now. Okay, here is the process where this little thing has popped up. The pressure gauge still says 0 or near 0. And if you can see the steam coming out of that thing, it's coming out hot and heavy. And I just set my timer for 10 minutes, and we're gonna let it vent to get all of the air that's in the chamber here that's not filled with jars. All of it's gonna come out and come up to pressure. So when 10 minutes is over, I will put the jiggler on and I will be back. Okay, my 10 minutes is up, and I am now going to take my jiggler and put it on there. And one thing I need to let you know is sometimes people who start using a pressure canner for the first time are pretty timid. They try to put it on real slow, or they put oven gloves or mitts or something, and I don't do that. Just throw it on there. You're not going to hurt yourself. The faster you do it, the better off you are. If you do it real slow and some steam can hit your hand, and that would be bad. So do it quickly and with boldness, you'll be fine. And you can already see the gauge here is already starting to creep up over 0. And I still have my fire on high. And when you see water bubbles and steam coming out from underneath the jiggler, that's perfectly normal. It's going to do that and leak a little bit until the pressure gets up to your proper elevation pressure, either 10 pounds at sea level or 15 pounds at high altitude. Mine is 15 pounds, and it's going to leak like that for a little bit until it starts coming up to full pressure, then it's going to seal itself off, start jiggling, and then we'll be ready to set the timer for 35 minutes. One thing I want to be sure to tell you at this point in time is if you have a pressure canner that is seeping steam out the edges where the lid meets the pressure canner, that's a no-go. I wish I had shown you the lid before I put it on here, but the Presto 23 quart pressure canner has a rubber ring on the inside of the lid. And you'll know if that ring starts to fail, there will be steam leaking out of your pressure canner along the lid line, and it's time to replace that rubber ring. Also, if you have a crack in the rubber ring, it's not going to seal properly. And also, probably every other time I take mineral oil on a paper towel and I saturate my rubber ring inside the lid with mineral oil to keep it soft and supple, and it creates a really good seal. If you have an all-American canner, those things are the bomb. Not in an explosive sense, of course, but they are so awesome. That's my dream canner. But they don't have rubber lids or anything, and you've got to make sure that that lid sits on there just right and everything. So I have no advice for people that have an All-American because I don't have one. This is just for the Presto that I have. So make sure you take care of that rubber ring gasket inside the lid, and your pressure canner will last for a very long time. Another thing I wanted to show you, this is a tip. If your pressure canner is too big for your stove and you were using a gas cooker, if the flame is yellow, it means your flame is not getting enough oxygen. And it can actually be dangerous. It can leak gas. You can get lightheaded, especially if you're doing canning all day. It's very important that you're getting enough airflow and the flames are blue at all times. It's just got to close to 15, and you can see the jiggler is starting to move. It's no longer siphoning steam or water. And as soon as it gets directly to 15, I am going to turn my fire down. Okay, that's good enough. Now let me turn my fire down to, on my stove, it's 3.5. And as long as that thing is jiggling, say 1 to 2, 3, 4 times every minute, it doesn't have to jiggle constantly. As a matter of fact, if it jiggles constantly, you'll see that my pressure gauge climbs above 15. I don't want it to jiggle constantly. So there you have it. I'm going to set my timer for 35 minutes and I'll be back with you when it's done. Okay, my 35-minute timer has gone off, and you can see here that it has stayed at 15 pounds of pressure. Just stayed steady because I turned my fire down to 3.5. Anyway, the timer just went off, and all I have to do now is turn the fire off. Done. That's how easy it is. And when everything goes down and loses all pressure, this little plug will pop down. The gauge will go back and read 0. And then, and only then, can you remove the jiggler. Take it out, take the lid off, and put the cans on top of a towel on a hard surface to cool off. So for right now, don't touch it. Leave it alone. Turn your fire off and walk away. And it may take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe sometimes half an hour to get completely depressurized, where you can take everything off and take the jars out of the canner. So there you have it. I'll be back. Okay, the plug is down. When I take the jiggler off, no steam escapes. You can see that it's back down to 0. And we're ready to take everything out of the canner. And you have to be very careful doing this because there's going to be a lot of steam. I lift it straight up and out. And a little bit of the water escapes and gets on the floor, but it's okay, it's just water. Okay, here is the 5 quarts and 1 pint that I've canned. The rutabaga turned yellow. It was white and now it turned yellow. These 2 are rutabaga. And you can see they're still boiling. And that will continue for quite a while. When you pressure can, they continue to boil even after they've cooled off enough for you to touch the jars. Some of them still bubble up like that. That's perfectly normal, and they'll do that for quite a while. So there you have it. Success!